Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best AD carries for Season 5, patch 5.9. So first up on my list, I have Vayne. Right now, I think Vayne is a pretty good pick in the right hands. She is harder to play in my opinion than some of the other AD carries in the game, so if you haven't tried out Vayne, then I definitely would recommend you trying her out in normal games before you head into ranked with her, because in my opinion she is a little bit harder to play than say like a Graves or a Corky. So I do think she's a pretty good pick though if you know how to play her, because she's a great pick in the meta right now. She does true damage with her W, which makes him a great pick in this tank meta. She also has an insane late game as well, and she's a very strong duelist if you know how to use her condemn into walls, and then you can like easily burst down a squishy target by doing that. She also has pretty decent mobility with her Q. Some cons to Vayne are she is a weaker laner. She doesn't have the laning phase of say an Ashe right now, or a Jinx or a Sivir, so if you are playing Vayne, then make sure you're not going super aggressive in the early game, because you'll probably get punished for it unless you know exactly what you're doing while playing Vayne. And in my opinion, like I said, she is harder to play. So next up on my list, I have Kogmaw. Pros to Kogmaw he's a very good pick in this meta. So I do think he's a little bit like Vayne in a sense that he's a tank killer. So if you're looking for a champion who can shred tanks really well, then Kogmaw is definitely a very good pick because he does percentage health damage with his W. And he's also got an insane late game. The damage that you can get from Kogmaw late game is just one of the best in the game. And he's also got long range on his W, which allows him to stay back and just fire from a distance during team fights. He also is a pretty strong laner, especially once you do hit level 6 as Kogmaw, because he's going to be able to poke really nicely with his ultimate. And a pro that not a lot of other people probably think of is that his ult can scout bushes, so never face check when you're playing as Kogmaw. Always make sure that you use your ultimate in a bush if you're not sure if the enemies are there or not. And one con to Kogmaw is that he does not have any mobility. Next up on my list, I have Sivir. So Sivir is definitely one of my personal favorite AD carries. I have over a 70% win rate with her this season, and I used to have like a 90% win rate, but I feel like she is dropping off a little bit lately. She isn't the strongest tank killer in the game, but I do think that she is still a very strong pick because she's got a great laning phase, and her ultimate, in my opinion, is one of the best for solo queue, because you can just make so many plays with her ultimate. You can catch opponents out, you can save your teammates by using it to disengage, so I just think it's an all-around great ability. She also has, or her spell shield is also very strong for the laning phase because it enables her to counter a lot of the strong supports right now, like Morgana, Thresh, Blitzcrank. She does really well against them because she can use her spell shield to block their CC. And she also has insane wave clear, the best in the game for an AD carry. And she's also got a pretty nice passive as well, and it enables her to kite really nicely. Some cons to Sivir are she is shorter range than most of the other AD carries in the game, and she is very vulnerable when her E and her ultimate are on cooldown because she doesn't have any mobility otherwise. So next up on my list, I have Jinx. Jinx is also a great pick in this tank meta right now because she does really well at shredding the tanks. She's also great at all stages of the game, and she's got long range auto attacks with the fish bones on her Q, which enables her to stay at a safe distance during teamfights and fire away. She also has great crowd control for an AD carry with her W and her E. And her ultimate is really strong as well for just picking off low health targets and just finishing them off so that they don't get away with a sliver of health. And she also has insane cleanup potential in teamfights because of her passive. If you can get ahead with Jinx and you can just start racking up kills in teamfights, then you can just snowball the game really hard because of Jinx's passive. She also does AoE damage with her auto attacks, and the only other champion in the game that can do this, I'm pretty sure the only other champion is Twitch, which makes her a very strong pick in that sense. And she's also a crazy strong tower pusher because of the passive from her Q. One con to Jinx is that she does not have a gap closer. So last but not least, on my top 5, I have Ashe. So pros to Ashe are she's an insane champion when it comes to kiting because of her passive, and because of her W and her ultimate as well. It makes her a really good pick against immobile tanks like, for example, Volibear or Udyr. it enables her to just kite away from them, and it makes her very unique because not a lot of other champions or pretty much no other AD carry in the game has the kiting potential that Ashe does. She also is very strong at all stages in the game, and because of the changes on her Q, she's a really good tank killer now, and that's one of the main reasons why she is so high on my list. She's also got great CC for an AD carry like I said, and she's got an insane level 6 all-in. If you're playing with a support like an Annie or a Leona, the level 6 all-in that you have is just really crazy because the amount of CC coming out of Ashe and the support that you're paired with will just be really strong, and you're going to be able to lock down that AD carry. And like if you're playing with a Leona, they're going to be stunned for like at least 2 or 3 seconds, because if Leona can land her ultimate in the middle, and then after that Ashe can follow up with her ultimate, they're going to be stunned for like 4 seconds, 3 or 4 seconds, and that's just going to enable you to burst them down before they can even get out of the CC. She's also got an amazing ultimate, and you can use this. I would definitely recommend not only using it in lane, but using it to help your team out as well. So if you're in base and you notice, or say your mid laner is playing a very bursty mid laner like a LeBlanc, but she's going up against a safe mid laner like an Orianna or a Ziggs that just sits back and farm, what you can do is you can use your ultimate down the mid lane, and the chance of you hitting the enemies are going to be very high, and then they're going to be stunned for, I'm not sure the duration, but I'm pretty sure it's like 3 or 4 seconds if you hit Ashe's ultimate at max range, and then the champion can just burst down whoever is hit by her ultimate. So never be afraid to just use your ultimate to help out your team as well. Her E is also global now, which I think is really good. For like scouting out where the enemy jungler is starting, it's also very strong, so I would recommend taking Ashe's E as your first skill and then just using it at about the 1 minute and 50 second mark to scout out where the jungler is starting. So that will definitely help your lanes out a lot, because then they'll know about what time frame that the jungler will be coming to gank their lane at. And one con to Ashe is that she does not have any mobility. So first up on the honorable mentions, I have Graves. Graves definitely isn't the strongest tank killer, which is why he is not on my top 5 anymore, but he is still a pretty good pick if the enemy team isn't very tanky, because he's got a lot of burst damage coming out of his Q and his ultimate, and he's still a very strong laner as well. So as long as the enemy team doesn't have like a full tank team, then Graves is still definitely a very strong pick. Next up I have Corky. So basically the same thing goes for Corky that goes for Graves. He's not the best tank killer in the game, but he does have very strong poke and very strong burst damage on squishy targets. So if the enemy team isn't very tanky, then Corky is still definitely a very good pick. Next on the honorable mentions, I have Lucian. So unlike Corky and Graves, Lucian is actually a pretty strong tank killer because of his passive. He's also got good mobility on his E, and his ultimate is very good, especially once you do get to the late game. If you can get a fully channeled culling off on the enemy squishy, then you're going to be able to kill them basically, because the damage coming out of your culling once you get to late game, I'm pretty sure it's over like 2,500 damage if you can hit every proc of it. So the damage coming out of Lucian late game is actually really good if you can hit that fully channeled culling. So I do think that Lucian is still a pretty strong pick right now. Next up I have Draven. So in my opinion, Draven is harder to play than most of the other AD carries in the game because of the precision you have to have with catching his Q. It's definitely harder to catch your Q during teamfights with Draven, and if you can't catch your Q, then you're missing out on a lot of his damage. So I do think he is a harder pick. But if you do know how to play him correctly, then he is very strong. Next up I have Calista. So the nerfs to Calista did hurt her a little bit because she can't kite as well anymore, because she will not be dashing as far anymore when she is moving away from enemies, so she's not as strong a pick against someone like a Volibear or an Udyr anymore, but I do think she is still a pretty solid pick. She's got a great laning phase because of the damage coming out of her E, and she has some pretty good lane combos as well. Pair her with like a Annie or pair her with a Kennen, and you can do some pretty good work in the laning phase. To round out the honorable mentions, I have Ezreal. So in my opinion, Ezreal is a pretty safe AD carry. He's got the blink on his E, and he can just sit back and farm if he's in a harder matchup with his Q. So I do think he's one of the safer AD carries to pick in the game, because he's a really good pick into, say, a champion like a Zed, because he's got his blink, and if he does buy the Quicksilver Sash, then it's going to be really hard for any of the assassins to assassinate him. And he does have a very good mid-game power spike once you do pick up that Trinity Force on him, so I definitely do think Ezreal is still a pretty solid pick. That is all for the video, guys. If you enjoyed, then be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you have not already. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you in my next video.